Good evening. It's Wednesday, March 11th. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Tonight, we're waiting for President Trump to address the nation on the federal response to the coronavirus outbreak. The World Health Organization is now calling the global crisis a pandemic. Here in California, Los Angeles County confirmed its first death from the virus, a woman in her 60s who was visiting the area. And within the last hour, more passengers from the Grand Princess cruise ship arrived at MCAS Miramar for quarantine. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman is live at Miramar to begin our coverage. Matt.
Maya, passengers from that cruise ship just actually arrived here behind me here at MCAS Miramar literally just minutes ago. We'll show you some video of that plane coming in to make a landing here on the base. At least one more plane is expected tonight. Another came in last night. And by the end of the day today, the base will have as many as 300 people. Everyone will be completing a mandatory 14-day quarantine. Remember, nearly 24 people on that Grand Princess cruise ship did test positive for the coronavirus. Meantime, the cruise industry here in San Diego is continuing to see ships still coming in. We talked to passengers earlier today who are getting ready to set sail.
It stops in Costa Rica, Honduras, I guess, and then it's in Mexico.
Many of the people we talked to boarding the ship said the same thing. They are not worried about the coronavirus.
We never thought about canceling. You know, if it was canceled, it would be up to all in America, but it's here behind us, so we're good.
Pardon me, but I'm sick of seeing it on the news, so I'm going on the ship and getting away from the television.
No offense.
The Rotterdam belongs to Holland America Line, who is now screening passengers and crew members who may have come from high-risk areas.
Gives a certain feeling of comfort that they are well aware of the risks of certain countries and that they take their precautions.
Cruise ships carry people from all over the world. Today we spoke with passengers from Belgium, England, and Holland.
Well, we are a little bit worried, but you know, we cruise. It's not the first time, so we know how it works.
This couple was supposed to take a cruise out of China, but after the coronavirus outbreak, they rebooked this trip out of San Diego.
So we even got our China visa in our passport, but can't use it.
Others say it's not them, but their family members that are worried.
No, it's more the outsiders who think, what are you up to? You know, are you really sure you want to do this? And I said, yes, of course.
No, I mean, my family have been more worried for me, I think because of all the hype. And I suppose they just can't bear the thought of me being quarantined on the ship.
What are you doing going on the cruise?
What do you guys say? What do you say to them?
Because we want to.
Yeah.
Health officials have said the elderly are more at risk when it comes to the coronavirus, but people we talked to weren't really bothered by that.
Whatever. You only live once.
Yeah, everyone we had a chance to talk to today, they definitely heard about what happened on the Grand Princess, that coronavirus outbreak. Obviously hoping that that doesn't happen to them as they leave here in San Diego. But here in San Diego, the cruise industry brings in around $46 million per year, quite a bit. And so far, no cruises have been canceled. Everything is still on schedule. As you can hear the jets behind me here live in Miramar. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Thanks so much, Matt. Now there are more than 1,000 cases of COVID-19 in the U.S., and health experts say more are coming. To limit the spread, some cities are taking dramatic steps to limit social gatherings. Karen Kafa has more from Washington.
Is the worst yet to come, Dr. Fauci?
Yes, it is.
The nation's top public health officials on Capitol Hill Wednesday morning, warning Americans to be prepared for the coronavirus situation to get worse long before it gets better.
We've got to assume that it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
The officials emphasizing the next month will be critical. Wednesday was the first full day of a 1-mile containment area around New Rochelle, New York, where dozens of cases have been traced back to one attorney.
The goal is to prevent exposure, because if there is no exposure, there is no risk.
Governor Andrew Cuomo declared the zone in the suburb as New York City looks at more ways to keep its dense population safe.
You're always within 6 feet of a person. So we really need to take more aggressive actions.
More areas taking those precautions. In Chicago and Pittsburgh, St. Patrick's Day parades are canceled. In Washington, Georgetown University adding to the list of campuses suspending in-person classes. And in Santa Clara County, California, where dozens of people have tested positive, gatherings of more than 1,000 people are temporarily banned. It's all in line with what federal officials recommend.
As a public health official, anything that has large crowds is something that would give a risk to spread.
The World Health Organization on Wednesday declared the coronavirus outbreak a pandemic. In Washington, Karen Katha, KPBS News.
And as the coronavirus continues to spread, county officials are working on a preparedness plan to deal with the homeless population and COVID-19. More now from KPBS reporter Priya Sridhar.
Outside of Father Joe's villages, talk of the coronavirus is rampant.
Spreading rapidly. It starts off as a normal cough, ends up bad. I mean, I'm still very new about it. I just hear it's really rapidly spreading.
Dr. Jeffrey Norris, medical director at Father Joe's, says many of his patients are asking him about it. At the beginning of this week, Norris started testing anyone with a fever and a cough for the flu. He says since the county doesn't have screening tests to give him for the coronavirus, he can help rule it out from patients by testing for the flu.
We have gotten actually from the County of San Diego rapid flu tests, so we at least have a way to find an alternative diagnosis if people are having fevers and cough. And there's good data that probably people don't frequently get infected with both viruses at the same time.
Today, officials from the Regional Task Force on the Homeless say public health nurses will be visiting bridge shelters to help screen homeless people for the coronavirus. They'll also have outreach teams hitting the streets to hand out hygiene kits and information cards to homeless people throughout San Diego to help them better understand the symptoms.
As a region, we should expect and prepare ourselves that this situation will get worse before it gets better.
They're also working to come up with potential government buildings, motels, or tents they could use should they need quarantine sites for the homeless. At Father Joe's, Dr. Norris says this population is especially vulnerable.
I think it makes them more likely to get the virus in the first place and then more likely to have poor outcomes related to the virus and frankly probably increases their risk of death.
The county says they're continuing to watch other areas' preparation plans to make sure our homeless neighbors have the resources they need. Priya Sridhar, KPBS News.
U.S. stocks fell into bear market territory after the coronavirus was declared a pandemic. Stocks plunged more than 1,400 points, or 5.9% on the Dow Industrial Average. The S&P 500 is just 1 percentage point away from falling into bear market, but that would end one of the greatest runs in Wall Street's history. The effects of the outbreak have been wide-ranging and far-reaching. Coming up, the impact the threat of the coronavirus is having on businesses and tourism here in San Diego. The Supreme Court announced today that it's allowing the Remain in Mexico program to continue for the foreseeable future along the southwest border. KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler tells us what was behind the decision.
The Remain in Mexico program has sent back more than 60,000 asylum seekers to Mexico to await their day in court since it was implemented last year. The program, also known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, was put on hold by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals last month. The court found the program was illegal. Its ruling said the program was placing asylum seekers needlessly in danger. The appeals court then asked the Supreme Court to decide whether to reinstate the program. In a paragraph-long decision, the Supreme Court did just that, saying the program can continue while the case is argued in court. That process could drag on well into next year. Monica Langarica is an attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union of San Diego and Imperial Counties. The ACLU is challenging the program.
Going forward, I think folks on the ground and folks who have been exposed to the people who are subject to MPP know that this just prolongs the danger that people are exposed to under MPP along the southern border.
On Twitter, Acting Department of Homeland Security Chief Chad Wolf celebrated the ruling, calling it a win for the American people. Luis Gonzalez, an attorney with Jewish Family Service, has been providing legal services to those sent back to Mexico. He says it's another challenge for families trying to find safety in the United States.
People are just confused because they get one decision, then another decision, then that decision changes, and the change has been happening so quickly that people get to the point where they don't fully understand what's going on, and I think that limits their ability to be able to decide whether they're going to move forward with their case, what they need to do.
The Supreme Court will decide next steps for the case in the coming weeks. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
San Diego played a big part in a major bust against one of the most violent drug cartels in the world. The DEA is sharing video and pictures of some of the raids carried out in what's being called Project Python. It targeted the Jalisco New Generation cartel. Hundreds were arrested in the sweep in recent months, with more than 130 of those in San Diego and Imperial counties. The leader of the cartel is one of America's most wanted, with a $10 million reward offered for his arrest. 23 years in prison. That was the sentence given today to disgraced former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. He was convicted last month on first-degree criminal sexual act and third-degree rape. Weinstein unexpectedly addressed the court, telling the judge, quote, "I really feel remorse for this situation. I feel it deeply in my heart," end quote. He has been accused of assaulting scores of women in the past.
For all those who are still preying on women, who want to engage in the high risk taking of harming women and thinking you'll get away with it, that gamble is likely not to pay off for you anymore. And if you're a high profile figure, don't expect anything but equal justice. Don't expect more than equal justice under the law.
The 67-year-old still faces felony sexual assault charges in Los Angeles. Senator Bernie Sanders is vowing to stay in the Democratic presidential race after losing more primary contests to former Vice President Joe Biden.
Poll after poll, including exit polls, show that a strong majority of the American people support our progressive agenda.
Yesterday was Super Tuesday, round 2. Sanders won in North Dakota and is leading in Washington state, but his path to the Democratic nomination is getting narrower. Biden claimed victories in Idaho, Mississippi, Missouri, and Michigan, the biggest prize of the night. And an update to the county's election results show a tight race for who will advance to November in the San Diego mayor's race. Less than 1,000 votes now separate council members Barbara Bree and Scott Sherman. Sherman is ahead by 836 votes. Now that translates to less than 0.3 of a percentage point. One of the candidates will face Todd Gloria in the general election. We're also seeing Measure C inch closer to passing. It's now approaching 65%. The initiative to raise hotel tourism taxes needs a 2/3 majority to pass. The extra money would be used to expand the convention center, provide homeless services, and affordable housing. The registrar's office says 85,000 ballots still need to be counted. A proposal to raise property taxes in San Diego for the construction of affordable housing is one step closer to the November ballot. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says supporters argue it's the city's best chance at making a dent in the homelessness crisis.
The measure would raise up to $900 million in bonds to fund the construction of low-income housing for vulnerable populations, including seniors, veterans, and people with disabilities. The City Council's Rules Committee voted today to continue working on the measure. Homeowners would pay an extra $19 a year for every $100,000 of their property's value. Supporters say the extra funding is critical to the city's efforts to combat homelessness and would help attract more state and federal tax dollars to San Diego. Councilman Chris Ward called the measure a no-brainer.
We know that San Diego lags far behind almost all major cities in the per capita availability of supportive housing. And so this is the kind of measure that actually gets us to correct that inequity and gets us to be able to have the kind of housing that we do need.
Councilman Mark Kersey cast the only no vote today. With Measure C on last week's primary ballot potentially falling short of the votes it needed to pass, that could raise pressure on city officials to find another source of new funding to deal with the housing crisis. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the World Health Organization calls COVID-19 a pandemic. We discuss what that means with a doctor from the agency. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
We got a bit of a break from the rain today, but more wet weather is expected over the next several days. Dajia Swad has our forecast.
We continue to track out umbrella weather across portions of Southern California as we're looking at our upper level low. What we have right now is this water vapor showing us moist versus dry air. Anywhere you see some yellow, we have some drier air working its way in, but much of us are in a blue zone across portions of the Southwest, generally speaking. We're going to continue to see this counterclockwise circulation move inland, and that's going to feed in moisture into our forecast. Tonight cooling down to 53 in Oceanside, 60 in San Diego, and 56 in Borrego Springs. Looking at the chance for some rain to kick up as we start to proceed into your Thursday early morning hours. Also going to be accounting for some more moisture in the forecast here as we lead into Friday as well. So here's the look. As we move past Wednesday night, mainly dry conditions, but definitely cloudy. Then as we move into Thursday morning, more moisture pumping in from the south, even going to notice some cells to the north of Borrego Springs. Continuing to see that moisture blossom across portions of San Diego County just before 4:30 p.m. And then notice back towards our east, lots of wet weather. Some of those cells will be on the heavy side, bringing in the likelihood for some flooding concerns. Friday morning, we'll get on the backside of some of that circulation of our low pressure system. That'll continue to feed in some rain and shower activity into San Diego County into that Friday morning, Friday afternoon as well. And then the colder air will come behind the storm system. So for Thursday, high of 67 in Oceanside, 72 in Borrego Springs, 49 in Mount Laguna, and 68 in San Diego. All looking at chances for rain and shower activity. Thursday will continue to be on the wet side through much of Southern California. That low will press out towards the east, getting into a drier slot. But then as we start to talk about the early week, another system drops in from the north, and that will bring another chance for wet weather across the region. At the coast, temperatures in the 60s, likely to see showers once again for the early week. Also looking at temperatures in the 60s for the majority of our forecast inland areas, and then feeling cooler air Monday here in the mountains, topping off only at 37 degrees. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
St. Peter's Square in Vatican City is usually a busy place, bustling with tourists. But now it's empty as Italy enacts a nationwide shutdown. Ben Weidman shows us how one of the countries hardest hit by COVID-19 is struggling.
Inside the intensive care unit in a hospital in northern Italy, doctors and nurses struggle with what they say is a tsunami of new patients. Every day brings ever more new cases, ever more deaths. Despite it all, the few tourists left in the northern city of Bologna pursue la dolce vita, though many sites are now closed.
Italy is so beautiful outside, but I think inside is better. But I have next trip, I think.
This country of 60 million souls is now, in theory, under lockdown. Movement is restricted, schools and universities closed, public gatherings prohibited, and all sporting events canceled.
Every day this main square is full of people that talk with each other, very close, kissing, handshakings. You don't see that now. So, of course, it's like the plague.
The bubonic plague killed thousands here in the 17th century. Bologna survived and went on to prosper. The cafes in the city's normally bustling central Piazza Maggiore are emptier than usual. Yet the few patrons are hardly panicking. Life must go on. The dogs still need to get out.
Two dark clouds hover over Italy at the moment. Of course, there's coronavirus, but many people here are in fact more worried over the long-term impact the virus will have on the economy.
Business has all but evaporated. And if draconian measures are what it takes to bring it back, some say, so be it. We have to face the emergency with the strictest measures, like they did in China, says Alessandra Cameriero. It's a dictatorship, but they did the right thing. Across the street, Emanuela Pignati says more should be done. I would be fine with a total 20-day shutdown, she tells me, because people are afraid and work is going badly. It's bad, but this city has seen worse. Ben Weidman, CNN, Bologna, northern Italy.
San Diego's economy is already being hurt by coronavirus concerns. As KPBS reporter Eric Anderson shows us, major and minor conventions are already canceling, and that has hit the hospitality industry hard.
San Diego's tourism economy employs 200,000 people and generates $11 billion worth of economic activity every year. Add in another $18 billion of indirect economic impacts, and it's easy to understand why local officials are concerned. The American Association for Cancer Research canceled its March convention this week, an event that would have brought 23,000 people to San Diego. Experimental Biology, the Parking Expo, and American Medical Group Association also canceled San Diego events.
We're seeing significant cancellations, as others are, for major meetings, and we're in the kind of the middle of our major convention season in San Diego. It usually runs February to May and June, and we've had some cancellations that are really going to hurt.
Tourism officials say they're working with clients considering canceling events to see if those events can be rescheduled or postponed. University of San Diego economist Alan Ginn says the hospitality industry isn't the only thing that could be affecting the local economy. He says closing the border because of coronavirus could have an immediate and dramatic impact.
I think that would cause serious problems. A lot of people live south of the border and then commute to work here in San Diego. And so there'd be some disruption as far as commuting is concerned. And then a lot of people south of the border will cross and shop here. So our retailers, particularly in the South Bay, would be negatively impacted if the border is closed for any significant length of time.
The question is no longer whether the coronavirus will have an impact on businesses in San Diego. Conventions have already been canceled. The question now is how long that impact will last and how deep the impact will be. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The NCAA is closing the March Madness basketball tournament to the general public. As a safety precaution, only essential staff and family members will be allowed to attend. SDSU will be one of the teams in the men's tournament. The location for their first game will be announced on Sunday. Sacramento and Los Angeles are the two cities hosting games in California. COVID-19 is bringing changes to public education. San Diego Unified just granted emergency powers to its superintendent to allow a faster response. UCSD and SDSU are moving their classes online. Athena Jones shows us how schools across the country are doing the same.
As Harvard's campus empties out at the end of this week for spring break, students living on campus are being asked by the university to pack up their things and leave until further notice.
They're making us move out by Sunday morning at 5 p.m. from all the dorms. But I think we have to stay calm, and that's what we're doing.
Harvard's decision to move all in-person classes online was not taken lightly, the university president says. In a letter to the Harvard community, President Lawrence Bacow tells students, "We are doing this not just to protect you, but also to protect other members of our community who may be more vulnerable to this disease than you are."
I definitely understand the precaution. It's definitely coming from like a young person who maybe the corona threat isn't as pressing for me, upsetting that I maybe won't be able to finish my freshman year the way I wanted to, but I also sympathize and understand where the university is coming from.
Massachusetts Institute of Technology announced similar measures Tuesday afternoon. From coast to coast, schools are having in-person classes taught remotely, including schools like Stanford, Ohio State University, and Syracuse. Schools are heeding the advice of top infectious disease experts to take caution with high population areas where the disease can move quickly.
Start seriously looking at this kind of mitigation. They call it social distancing, but it's common sense stuff. You don't want to go to a massive gathering, particularly if you're vulnerable.
K-12 schools are also temporarily closing in some districts across the country, including some Chicago public schools, Fulton County schools in the Atlanta area, and the North Shore School District in Western Washington. In New Rochelle, New York, the governor has deployed the National Guard to help contain the virus's spread. Authorities are closing areas where large crowds gather, including houses of worship and multiple schools, for cleaning.
One of the places where people gather together, particularly, is the school systems in schools and other areas, events and daily or weekly activities. And we believe that the most important thing from a public health standpoint is to minimize that.
Athena Jones, CNN, Cambridge, Massachusetts.
And taxpayers could get a little more time to file because of the coronavirus. The U.S. Treasury is considering pushing back the April 15th deadline. The Treasury Secretary told Congress the Trump administration wants to provide relief for most individual taxpayers and small businesses. So far, there's no word on what the new deadline would be, but a formal announcement is expected soon. Amateur astronomers discovered something simply unique in the sky. Take a look at this. It's being called the teardrop star, one that's never been seen before. The star is roughly 1,500 light years away from Earth and is twice the mass of our sun, and is pulsating on one side, giving it that teardrop shape. And of course, health is top of mind in the news right now. One thing that's always important is proper rest. During National Sleep Awareness Week, Reed Binion has details on just how much sleep Americans are getting.
Each year, the National Sleep Foundation conducts a poll cataloging our sleep patterns. This year, it focused on how often Americans feel sleepy throughout the week and how it impacts our daily lives. On average, Americans feel sleepy 3 days a week, and they try to combat it with anything from fresh air to caffeine to medication. But 62% say they try and deal with it by just shaking it off. The two main reasons behind grogginess during the day were because they aren't getting enough quality sleep or just don't get enough sleep, period. And this affects everything from mood to feeling physically sick. So, how much sleep do you really need? According to the National Sleep Federation, it depends on your age. Adults 18 to 64 should get 7 to 9 hours a night, while adults 65 and over need 7 to 8 hours. For today's Health Minute, I'm Reed Binion.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.